My fight for free speech was held back from a very, very young age. Etonian abusers, North London type, made good, kind of not really what I would call elite, and my tastes were really less progressive than theirs. So I wondered why their witch-like wives were allowing this, and I was told that, he would divorce his wife and he would marry me. At the time, I thought that was a great way to escape the punishment I was receiving for my transgression of having been abused and not wanted. So, I found truth in the end. I found my voice. Every time I went to the authorities, I was treated to, the usual common purpose pat on the head, smoothing everything down, because it seems to be with everybody I've spoken to while working with child abuse survivors that we are supposed to be really cannon fodder. There is actually no way forward, and it seems to almost be written into the plan of sort of decimating identity and a sense of who you are and a sense of entitlement that is being obliterated from the new norms, because the new entitlements are so much more favoured by the state with its common purpose scheme. So what we are seeing now is the police acting in favour of certain groups, the hierarchy acting in favour of certain groups, as we see even in the Labour Party with their sort of division between the say how it is grassroots Labour people and the claims of anti-Semitism. Never the two do meet, never seem to reach out to one another. So we're seeing massive conflicts and divisions in favour of identity groups at the expense, and make no doubt it is at the expense of the integral identity of what used to be Britain. So be aware of what's happening. More and more you will see this happening. The New World Order is using this to further its advancement of destruction and then rebuilding under, the New World Order. And many of us have learnt this early on, many of us through silencing, but now you're beginning to see how censored and silenced we are. Well, many of us have known this before, like myself. No, it's no surprise for me, but, I've written my book, An Oath to Hell, because every door was shut, every gatekeeper closed the door, and it seemed like the oath and testimony was the state against me and my truth and honesty. Now this is reaching you. I experienced this even in free speech groups, which were supposed to uphold the anti-identity group pushing forward. Yet at every angle, people like Angus Kennedy, promoting the idiocy of identity groups using art to promote themselves rather than excellence. I mean, in a group who made this a disabled group, or we are representing this people, we are representing that people in art. Yet he managed to travel the world on the basis of very cliquey, Kabbalistic group favoritism, being married to the right people in the same way Keir Starmer was. So yeah, you can't find anywhere which is uncorrupted by this new normal. Well, it's not that new, but it's not normal either. So let's see what we can do about it. I've been banned from a free speech group. Barbara Hewson's gang, Barbara Hewson, they wanted to lower the age of consent to 13, and much of this group, to do with the entryists into the Brexit Party, Claire Fox and team, have come out in arms against me because they've managed to find a chink in my armour. I was involved with one of the team. I just mentioned the name. But I realised it was all a cover when people like Jean-Marc Dreyfus were telling me, we own culture. And then I saw that all the groups at the Academy of Ideas with all the intellectuals were very much focused a certain way, definitely anti-survivor, because their ideology is free for all, mix it up. We're kind of all the same, although they do preach nationalism and this, but they preach lots of things because they're contrarianism. So, I came to know too much. I was silenced, and the one chink of my armour that I was involved with this person who deliberately tried to, corrupt the situation. I found it quite intimidating, and it threw me for quite a long time, actually, a few years ago, because I was told, to be quiet and not, and, what I'd seen and heard hadn't happened, sort of thing, on many occasions. Very distressing. But it just yet another indication of the Kabbalistic nature of what is happening with the New World Order. They pretend to be free speech, they pretend to be, the BBC, but on the other hand, you get people like Rachel Riley with a big T-shirt saying, be careful what news you believe, and you realise that often the very people shouting the loudest about free speech are the ones who are in key positions to try and control it, like, the Battle of Ideas team I discovered, sadly. Although I did always have my doubts. These people are organised, and they are the type of people who, at the top of it all, believe reputation and making it there through having the right papers suddenly more important than, your pre-existing bonds within a nation. So they will dance up and down about any sort of thing if they feel it will get them power or acceptability. Like Cameron was talking with Merkel, multiculturalism has failed. And yet, nothing was done other than to accelerate it. So what they're saying is that multiculturalism has failed. So obviously we're on the way out, people like me. So, and you, what can we do? Pray, basically, because, somewhere in your mind, you'll remember the old stories about Antichrist, won't you? And who do you think predominantly represents the target? Well, I'll give you a clue. Christian nations, people a bit like you and me. We may not know well, I do, I've studied it, but many of us haven't really studied our religious texts. But if you do, you'll find out about the payback of Babylon. I find it very fascinating. It says, in her was found the blood of all those who'd been killed on the earth and the blood of saints. So, I mean, really what you're talking about is whose blood is more valuable, who deserves the biggest chunk of the payback. And it's become very ruthless out there, and at the expense of the grassroots people. Who really deserve to be heard, whose wounds, are not something that they carry from generation to generation like a grudge on the shoulder. We're very new to being victimised en masse. We don't use our children or our suffering quite in the same way. We're not accustomed to it. It feels a bit distasteful even just to talk about the abuse that we've suffered. But it has been organised abuse, and it's been deliberately allowed to continue because it's part of the bigger picture, part of the dismantling process. I see it in those terms, without any vengeance towards anybody I meet. I think it's the authorities higher up, as I said, and I came quite close to knowing what they're all about. On many occasions, my little dalliance with the Battle of Ideas crew brought it home to me how elites think, and what I suffered from early on was the fact that they predominantly feel it's about image, reputation, so therefore the Me Too's, everything came up about that, but it really missed the real victims, the mass rapes, Sweden being the rape capital of Europe. It misses all those things out conveniently and makes it about, the little tugs of war here and there amongst people who are relatively empowered, not the mass abuse of children, not the mass abuse of nations by other nations. So, yeah, that was a bit of a obfuscation, which we're used to seeing. But everything is becoming very much more controlled. They know they have a finger on the pulse of the nations. They know how we think. They know how to manipulate our characteristics, our natural foibles, and bring out sympathies here and there. But our sympathies must remain, towards the people nearest and dearest to us, towards a sense of belief in self, which is what they want to deny, because it makes us more malleable for their new world order. No, I mean, the Good Samaritan crossed the road not because of difference, but despite of it. And of course we should be kind to people, but we shouldn't have that kindness taken away and replaced, and our identity is made worthless, as if we are just, what we are on the outside is a shell that doesn't match the inside, and everything is so mixed up that we can't tell anymore what is truly integrally good and what is bad, which is what they want, mix it up sort of thing. We can't even tell what's good and bad with paedophilia and things. It's been creeping in now. We can't even tell what's good and bad with, all these celebrities and royals who are being accused. There's 101 things now that we can't see very clearly, which is good and which is bad and which is the hidden hand behind it. And be very aware that we're living in very confusing times. Try to look at the things that will give you some sustenance. You could try my book, Perversity Culture of the End Times. I try to help out as much as is feasible with my knowledge, my studies, which are quite intensive and have gone on a long time, from a strand of thought I picked up, and against all the odds I ran with, and I found it made sense. You could look at the Book of Revelations. You could look at the Book of Daniel, Enoch, the Book of Jude, which talks about Enoch. You could look at these things, but please don't get confused in our times. Realise there is a very tangible attack now, and have some awareness of what that involves and what it means and what you should be trying to take care of.